Hi, I'm Carissa Schreiner, and I'm a member of the First United Methodist Church here in Frederick, Oklahoma. One of the questions I think a lot of us are asking in our churches these days is, why do we need to think about disaffiliating now? The main answer to this question is that right now, the United Methodist Book of Discipline allows our churches to disaffiliate for reasons of conscience surrounding the issues of sexuality in our denomination. Specifically, paragraph 2553 in the Book of Discipline allows churches to disaffiliate with their property if they have at least a 2/3 majority of members present at a congregational vote approve of the disaffiliation, and if they meet obligations as defined by the Conference Board of Trustees, including paying for the church's pension liability and apportionments. The main thing to remember is that this paragraph can only be used until December 31st, 2023. After that, the discipline states that it shall not be used after that date. So unless there is any further action by the General Conference, our local churches will be bound by what is called the trust clause that says all property of the local church is held in trust for the annual conference. So congregations that wish to disaffiliate after this year should expect to have to reach some kind of purchase agreement with the annual conference in order to buy their own building, if the conference even allows for them to do that. I know that paragraph 2553 has significant cost attached to it, but it allows a fairly clear path for disaffiliation without the burden of buying back your property. Paragraph 2553 is unique. There has never been a clearer path prior to paragraph 2553, and then at the end of this year, that path disappears. There is no clear reason to suggest there will be a different path forward after the next General Conference. So that's the first reason our churches need to decide now. The second reason a church might decide to leave now is the uncertainty of where the United Methodist Church will be after 2024. As of right now, the Judicial Council has said that the delegates to the next General Conference will be those elected for the 2020 General Conference. That is why this is important for you to know. Many traditionalists in the United States who support our current traditional language on human sexuality have already left or soon will leave the denomination. It is apparent that the U.S. delegation will have far fewer traditionalists than in previous general conferences because of this loss. Because progressives have fought so hard to change our denomination's traditional language on these issues for the past 50 years, we can be sure that the issue will be pushed again. We cannot be sure, of course, how votes will go, but it would be fair to say that most observers from the traditionalist side of the debate believe they will not have enough traditional-leaning delegates to maintain our current traditional language. Indeed, we know that in many annual conferences, there are bishops, clergy, and churches who are already living into their preferred future of a big tent that allows them to set their own standards for holiness. You can do a quick Google search of the United Methodist Big Tent and find plenty of examples. Now, it's always possible that when paragraph 2553 lapses at the end of the year, that a few months later, the 2024 General Conference will add a new paragraph to the Book of Discipline to allow further disaffiliations to take place. If such a paragraph is adopted, we can only guess whether the terms will be kinder or harsher toward traditional churches. But we do know that those left in the big tent will be feeling the financial strain caused by many traditional churches and their apportionments leaving. And General Conference may not be as inclined to allow churches to leave for reasons of conscience. And that's something to think about. And a third reason, some annual conferences are making it more difficult for churches to disaffiliate even before paragraph 2553 ends. There are several annual conferences that are requiring churches to pay even more than the minimum required by paragraph 2553. Just to our east, the Arkansas Conference actually turned down disaffiliation requests, even though churches fulfilled the requirements of 2553 and were approved by their conference board of trustees. And in the North Georgia Conference, the bishop suspended considering any disaffiliation request at all due to what the bishop felt was misinformation in the conference. This is not to say that either the General Conference or the Oklahoma Annual Conference would do that. But we think it is fair to ask the question, is there really any reason to think that leaving will be easier if we wait? If your church knows it is not happy with the way the Book of Discipline is being enforced across our connection, a connection that our annual conference supports through our apportionment dollars, then now may very well be the best time to make a decision to disaffiliate. You don't have to wait to see which way the wind blows at the next general conference. You also don't have to wait for your pastor to start the disaffiliation process. There is good information on the okumc.org website that can tell you how to get that started. If it seems overwhelming, please reach out to other churches in your area who have already disaffiliated or have help. Most of those would love to give you assistance on whatever you need. So let me sum this up. Why disaffiliate now? Number one, the door to paragraph 2553 to disaffiliate closes at the end of this year. Here in Oklahoma, your church needs to be completely finished with discernment, hold a special informational church conference, and have your church conference to vote on the disaffiliation before the end of the summer, to even be considered at October's special called annual conference. Number two, the current trajectory of the United Methodist Church is to become a wider tent. Wider, we would argue, than that allows for us to. And number three, there is a trend in some annual conferences to make it more difficult for churches to disaffiliate. The longer we wait, the more uncertainty there is about and how disaffiliations will be allowed. I simply invite you to carefully and prayerfully consider what is best for your church. While we wish each of us had all the time in the world to make decisions about disaffiliation, unfortunately, the clock is ticking on paragraph 2553. Don't wait too long.